Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For the first time ever, this is the third episode I've uploaded in a single day, and the interview guest for this episode has worked in elder care in countries like Nepal and Guatemala and is the author of the nonfiction book Drowning in Now, A Search for God and Humanity at the Top of the World. Her name is Alicia Demetropolis, and here's my interview with Alicia. Alicia Jean Demetropolis, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks, Aaron.
As I always start, feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello, everybody. I am the president and founder of the Global Humanity Initiative. We're a global nonprofit that helps to rescue elders, homeless and abandoned elders from the streets of Nepal and Guatemala. We give them a new family, a safe place to live, and unconditional love. And the book that Aaron and I are discussing today is Drowning in Now, A Search for God and Humanity at the Top of the World. And it's an accounting of the first trip to Nepal and how this whole thing came to be. What a crazy, crazy ride it's been. But that book just about covers it. Yeah.
Without spoiling too much of your book, Drowning in Now, A Search for God and Humanity at the Top of the World, what is your book about?
Well, it took me a really, really long time to figure out what the book wanted to be about, because I went through this extended 6-year process of documenting everything that had happened. And of course, as a writer, we're in love with everything we write. And a 550,000 word book is just not a book. So during that process, a friend of mine who teaches workshops on writing memoirs, she just kept telling me, the book will tell you what it's supposed to be about. And that's suddenly this title came to me. And that's when I understood the book is supposed to be about going to Nepal, expecting to find this happy, carefree, Shangri-La type of place, because that's what the Nepal Tourist Board wants everybody to see. And I happened to find that children were putting their elders, their parents out into the streets. They said, I can't afford to feed you anymore. And they just, in some cases, Aaron, they're putting their parents out of their own home. The parent owns that home. And they just go, well, can't afford to feed you anymore, can't afford to take care of you anymore. And that parent is on his or her own. Or they move out of the country and they leave the parent behind and they can't take care of themselves. And I was sitting with a homeless man one day, and one guy threatened to hit him to see if he could get a reaction out of me. Someone else wanted to spit on me. This was not the happy, carefree Shangri-La, Nepal that I thought I was going to visit. And when the title came to me, that's when I understood, oh, no. I have to take the uncomfortable step of telling everyone, look, there's an underside here that I'm trying to, I can't fix it, but I'm trying to make it better for some people. I can't save every homeless elder, but I can save quite a few. And that's what the book is about. It's everything I went through to figure out why I was there, why I had this driving need to go. And then just everything that tourists don't normally see. It was a wild ride. It was just a wild ride. So I'm done. That's it.
That is horrible to hear about anywhere in the world, but to hear about elderly people just being thrown into the street. I mean, people here in the States uh, think having to put a parent in a nursing home
Right.
is a sin. I could never. I take care of my elderly mother who lives with me. I could never even contemplate just simply throwing her out in the street.
Yeah. And a lot of us can't. But what I've learned in the past few years while running this nonprofit is that it's unfortunately happening all over the world. A few years ago, a family in Mexico got desperate and they put their elderly mother in a cardboard box with a blanket on the side of a remote road. In Japan, a young woman was so desperate that she drove her father out on an expressway to a bus stop and left him there. I mean, these stories are happening around the world. And what I've learned is that we are quickly approaching, it's beyond a global crisis at this point. We are quickly approaching the tipping point where we're just not going to be able to take care of all of our elders around the world. It's a global crisis. It really is. I can't imagine doing it either, Aaron. I know what you're going through.
You've described the writing process for your book as involving a lot of emotional breakdowns, temper tantrums, and throwing yourself onto the couch like a spoiled child. Why was that the case?
um, well, yeah, that happened a couple of times. Because I was struggling with the writing process, and I was struggling with cutting out pieces of this journey that didn't fit. And like I said earlier, you know this, all writers know this. We are in love with what we write, and we think that everything we write is important, and it can be emotionally painful to cut something out of a book. But the biggest problem I had was the ending. And I wrote this ending, and my editor came back and said, I don't like the ending. You can do better. And it was like a knife in my heart, disappointing her. It was like, oh God, oh God. So I worked for a year, got the book to where she really liked it. She was really impressed. And I thought, she's really going to like the ending now. I've been through 5 different endings and I have the best ending ever. And boy, she's going to like it. And when I talked to her on the phone, she goes, I hated it. Yeah. It's like, oh God. But that was the biggest problem for me. And that caused the biggest amount of temper tantrums, because I was like, I don't know how to end this book. I don't know how to end it because it never ended. It's just going. It's going. It's still going to this day. I don't know how to end it. But I did several times. I would throw myself on the bed because my desk was in the bedroom, or I would come out and throw myself on the couch. And the dog would just look at me and roll her eyes. And my husband would look at me and just roll his eyes. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. It hurts too. Yeah. And then I'd get up and go back to work. So, yeah.
I would probably describe my writing process as a combination of putting writing projects figuratively, not literally, on the back burner to focus on work on my podcast and my YouTube channel, as well as having anxiety attacks at the sight of a blank page on my computer screen, although I'm taking an anti-anxiety medication now, so that's helped with the underlying cause of my writer's block, which was just frequent anxiety.
Yeah. So how do you get through your writer's block? For me, this book was hard, but I spent 8 months just downloading everything that happened and writing out all the emails and putting emails back to back and journals and going through all my photos and documenting every last little piece. But, starting from scratch when you have writer's block is just agonizing. How do you get through it?
Well, I'm getting over about a 4.5 year period of writer's block now, and after a couple of weeks of taking my anti-anxiety medication, I still feel anxious from time to time, but I'm not having like panic attacks at the sight of a blank page. I'm mostly just starting writing down whatever comes to mind, like about 50, 100 words a day if I don't have interview questions for a podcast to write as like notes, and then just go from there, try to write more, get into writing book manuscripts maybe sometime later this year.
Yeah. My friend who's a screenwriter, he always tells me there are lots of ways to get through writer's block, and one of the best ways is to do stream of consciousness writing, where you just start, if we're on the computer, we just start typing, or if you're writing in a notebook, you just start writing, and you can say, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. This is what's going on today, and I don't think it's worthwhile. And something usually comes of it. If you have it in the back of your mind that you're looking for a storyline, something will usually come from it. For me, with my fiction writing, someone will say something, or I'll have this thought and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea for a story. And I'll write down whatever someone said, and it'll just sit there because that's all it is something great that someone said. It is not the basis for a story. That's my biggest problem with my fiction.
How did working in Nepal influence how you wrote your book?
Well, there'd be no book without Nepal, but I because I now have, like, these are my family members in Nepal, these people that you hear me talk about in the book. If I haven't changed their names for privacy reasons, I'm still in touch with them. I still see them. I'm going back in a couple of weeks because I do work there. So for quite a while, when I was trying to put this book together, I didn't want to offend anyone. I didn't want to offend my family. And I especially didn't want to get on the wrong side of the Chinese government, because there was a lot in there that talks about how China has basically taken over Nepal through undermining their political system. It just got really convoluted. And my heart was in it too much, and there was too much I wanted to say. I really had to step back and look at priorities. How much do I want to talk about China? Okay, not that much, not that much. How much do I want to worry about offending my family? If they love me, they'll understand. And only one family member has read it, because not all my family can speak fluent English. And she called it brave. So being there and having that connection made it a little harder to be brutally honest about some stuff. But once I got through that, once I got over that hurdle, it just flowed. I just gave myself permission to speak the truth regardless.
Is your book self-published, traditionally published, or published by a hybrid press?
Self-published.
Yeah, and the books I'm currently writing, I'm going to go the self-published route for those. Now, there are disadvantages to self-publishing. Namely, it is possible to publish a absolute garbage if you're doing everything wrong, like I did for my first book, which is probably the worst book ever written. It was a motorsports fiction novella called Lady in the Fast Lane. I have no recollection of actually writing the book because I was in such a bad mental state at the time.
I want to read that book. No, I'm not kidding. I want to read that book.
Okay.
I'm serious. I'm fascinated by that.
Okay.
So two things come to mind with that. Publishing houses are hurting because authors are learning that they can do as much or better without them. It takes 3 years for them to, if they agree to publish a book, it takes 3 years for them to get through the process. And of course, they pay royalties, but those royalties don't pay out until after you've paid off your advance. And the contract is rigged. I've known this since I was in my 20s. The contract is rigged so that you never actually get a lot of royalties because you're so busy paying off your advance. And people think that Amazon is the only way to go. That's not true. You get on Goodreads, you can advertise elsewhere, you get on your podcast, you market to your friends and families. I'm working with independent booksellers right now that I met last year, and I'm marketing to them and sending them copies of the book. And you get your book up on Ingram Spark, so that these bookstores can order it for people who want to go the traditional route. So there are lots of things you can do. It makes it hard. You're a podcaster and a YouTuber, and I'm running a nonprofit, so that can be really challenging to fit everything into your 40-hour week. But we can do it. We can sell books on our own without a publishing house behind us. It just takes a lot of work. So that's number one. Number two, have you ever read Philip K. Dick's books?
No.
Huh. So there is a collection of 4 of his last books. The books are A Maze of Death, Veilus. I can't remember the third book. And then the last book is the Transmigration of Timothy Archer. So 3 of those books were written after he had what he felt. He experienced a break in the time-space continuum. And other people would describe it as a psychotic break. He experienced it differently. And you would not, I could not believe what I was reading. The volume of information in this man's brain and how he ties it all together, philosophy, history, religion, it was mind-boggling. And I devoured it. And at the same time, I kept going back and rereading sections because I thought you got right into his head. He was stream of consciousness writing, and this is what I'm experiencing. And I think sometimes when we're having these episodes, we might very well be producing some of our best work, even though we think it's crap.
How do you keep going and creating?
Yeah. Check back with me in another year when I've started writing. Oh, I've got one more book in my brain that stems from the experience in Nepal, and it's for all the dog lovers out there. It's just not a very serious book. It's not a long book. But then there's another book that I want to write. But first, I have to take another 3-month journey. I have to go face my demons in Saudi Arabia. And then there'll be a book out of that. So I haven't created in a while, which is probably why I'm so cranky.
My mom, before I was born, she was a shop foreman at a plastic pipe extruding plant in Danville, Illinois. It was called Robin Tech. The site of it now is a casino, by the way. But the prior building was Robin Tech, the plastic extruding company that was owned by Brad Corbett. And uh, let's just say the Saudis got a lot of their pipe back in the 1980s from Robin Tech, and they did not like the idea of a woman making their product.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they didn't. Where was the plant? You said
It was
Danville?
at Danville, Illinois. It's no longer there, and the site of it's now the Golden Nugget Casino in Danville.
Oh, funny. Yeah, because my father worked at a plastics extruding company for a very short time in his younger years. But I think that was on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't in Danville. So, yeah, I mean, it stems from something that happened in the book before I even left for Nepal. I want to go face these demons in Saudi Arabia. I have to go spend 3 months there. And that'll be another book. I hope it doesn't take me 6 years to write that one because my mental capacity can't handle that.
In addition to Nepal, what countries is the Global Humanity Initiative that you're the president and founder of active in?
Right now, we're in Nepal and Guatemala. And I'd like to expand. We have one elder care home in Nepal and one elder care home in Guatemala. I'd like to expand to other countries, but it's just not time. I've got too much to do with the nonprofit before I can get it into a position to really go out there and expand. My big, hairy, audacious goal is to go into a third world country or a country that was recently hit by man-made disaster like civil war or natural disaster, and work with local agencies, go out, find these homeless elders, make sure they're fit for living in a community setting, because dementia comes in all different forms and there are mental illness situations out there too. So find them, bring them to a place of safety, build an elder care home that fits with the culture, get them set up on a sustainable food program so they can help to feed themselves, make sure it's staffed, and support them for however long as they meet our standards. But that's my big, hairy, audacious goal, is to now go into other countries and rescue and build and support and staff and take it from the very beginning to fruition, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
If a lack of elder care is a global crisis, I think we kind of sort of touched on the reason why earlier in the interview. Why don't you work in elder care here in the United States?
I it's a touchy subject for a lot of people, because a lot of people only want to support work that's done in the US, and I get that. We have a lot of resources here in the US. We have a lot of resources. We have a government that is a mess a lot of times. When you try to get something done through the VA, it can take forever, and all these government entities sometimes don't talk to each other, but we have those resources. In third world countries, they don't. And they're not aware of the resources. And it's every man for himself in a third world country. So during the pandemic, I actually supported a homeless shelter locally. And they just happened to have a house full of seniors. I mean, 90% of their residents every night were seniors, and a lot of those were veterans. And so I would take hot meals to them twice a month during the winters. And I was the only nonprofit non-religious organization doing this. And when 2023, the winter of 2023, February, March, April started to wind down, I looked at how much I was spending on those 2 meals a month. And that could have provided a month and a half worth of support in Farping, Nepal, or a third of a month's support in Guatemala. And all I was doing was buying 20 some hot meals twice a month. That's how much our money here can go further overseas. And the people who support my nonprofit are using their very hard-earned money to do this. And I have a responsibility to use that as best as I can. And on top of all of that, Aaron, there are so many other nonprofits. There are 2 very large nonprofits running that shelter. One of them a multi-million-dollar nonprofit. And the other people taking food, they're all churches. And they have the luxury of passing the hat every week, and then they get all the money they need for their food for that week. I don't have that luxury. My services are needed more overseas than here.
Yeah, I understand your point, because here in the United States, if you were doing elder care work here, you'd probably be dealing with a lot of like Veterans Affairs bureaucracy, if it's VA patients, or nursing home bureaucracy. You're dealing with a lot of bureaucracy here in the United States, whereas in a lot of third world countries, the national governments there don't really have much control over anything.
They don't. They try to. They don't. And I excuse me, admitting this actually does literally get caught in my throat. I fly under the radar there. So I'm not registered in Nepal or Guatemala. I work directly with the nuns in Guatemala that are running the elder care home there. And I work directly with this young man. He runs an NGO that runs the nonprofit in Nepal. So I fly under the radar. So right now, the government of Nepal and the government of Guatemala don't know I exist. Once they find out, they can make things difficult, because they don't have their act together, but boy, they want bribes.
Alicia, you were a fascinating and intriguing guest, and I thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you for the conversation. This was fun. This is really fun. I appreciate it.
It was saddening to hear about how elders are neglected in a lot of countries, but it was wonderful to interview Alicia about her book. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.